spaghetti. What's up everyone, it's Goose, and today I'm overdue for cleaning my room again. Today I wanted to chat about the Boss SD-1 and why, despite all the modelers I own, I still keep this around. When I started my guitar gear journey, I started with smaller units, so stuff like the HX Stomp or the GT1000 Core. And because these are smaller, I usually just paired them with overdrive, like an analog overdrive. Fast forward to today, and I'm using way bigger modelers like the FM9 or the Quad Cortex that take up a lot more space, and so therefore I started using the drives inside of these units. And when I did that, I was kind of disappointed. I actually ended up having to do a lot of adjustments to the drive block in order to get the SD-1 to feel right. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take the real thing and compare it to the SD-1 inside the Fractal. And shout out to Jonathan Cordy, because he had just done a video on the Zendrive and comparing the Zendrive to the one in the HX Stomp. And that just gave me the idea to make this video because I actually really felt like the model in the Fractal just wasn't quite what I was expecting. Before we move on, if you're a bedroom musician and you like nerding out about guitar gear like me, consider hitting like and subscribe. Alright, so I can hear a bunch of you now saying, well, the SD-1 Waza, which is what I was holding, is not exactly the same as the regular Boss SD-1. And you would be somewhat correct. Of all the comparison videos that I've ever watched though, they do sound really close in the standard mode, and we're going to only be looking at the standard mode today, but in most of the comparison videos I've watched, they are very similar. Some say the original is clearer, some say that it's darker, some say the same things about this being clearer or darker. My thoughts on it are just that the regular SD-1 probably has more of a parts tolerance like inconsistency, so there's more variation between units. And Brian Wampler had made a video about that on the regular Tube Screamer, and I would imagine the SD-1 also has the same sort of thing. Anyway, let's start with the comparisons. We're going to do a like-for-like comparison first, so basically just taking the settings on the stock model of the Fractal without any adjustments to any of the additional settings, and just using the ones that are on the actual knobs, and matching it with this, and then doing a comparison that way. And then after that, I'm going to make some changes to the additional settings in the Fractal model in the additional settings to match the Waza a little bit better. I'm going to cover two types of tones also going into an amp model in the Fractal. The first one's going to be the Orange 8030. It's going to be kind of a cleaner tone, and I'm going to use the drive on the SD-1 to create some breakup and a little bit of distortion. And then the other tone we're going to use is with the Marshall JVM, which is going to be a high gain, more metal tone, and that's going to be the usual, having the drive all the way down and the level all the way up. And I'm going to make sure on the dials are going to be in the same positions between the actual pedal and the Fractal, and I'm not going to touch any of the other parts of the chain. My guitar will be the Kiesel Osiris with DiMarzio illuminators in the bridge, and the IR will be a Marshall VOR12 with V30s from the Own Hammer Heavy Hitters pack. And I think that covers it. Before we start with the comparison though, I really want to stress that the differences might be subtle at first, but really listen for like individual notes, particularly in lower palm mutes or even runs up higher in the frets. And yeah, with that out of the way, let's get started with the comparison. All right, so my thoughts is that compared to the Waza, the Fractal model definitely has less output. And I'm keeping the Waza in the standard mode, which is actually pretty close in terms of output to most SD-1 comparisons I've seen. So it is surprising to me that the Fractal model is a little lower in kind of the push that it gives the front end of the amp. And the bass is actually a little looser on the model in the FM9. Despite not having as much of a push, I actually felt like when you heard palm mutes, it was just a little bit kind of thuddy. I don't know how to describe it other than thuddy, but it was just kind of dull and it didn't really feel like it compressed in a very tight way. Versus if you have the Boss SD-1 Waza running through it, the low end is very chunky and still tight and it just has a very good grunt to it. And I did notice that there is a little bit more of a lower mid emphasis on the SD-1 Waza than there was on the SD-1 model in the Fractal, so that kind of contributes to it feeling like there's a little bit more aggression. So how are we going to fix this? Well, Fractal has a lot of different options to help you adjust the drive block to your liking. All right, so this is FM9 edit, and I'm going to go over the changes I made to the drive block to make it sound more like the actual pedal. The first thing I did was actually go to the amp block. So I had to do this for both the JVM model as well as the orange model. But basically, you would go in here and you would adjust the input trim to be at 1.2. And that's just kind of adjusting how much push the actual pedal gives versus the digital model does. The next thing is in the tone tab of the drive block, I'm going to increase the bass up to 6. And that's to give it that lower mid grunt that I was saying that the real pedal has versus the model. But when you do that, you actually start to notice that there's a little bit of flub added. So I ended up taking that low cut and bringing it up to 80. And I feel like that gives that balance between upping the bass here and the low cut here. I feel like that gives you that balance of having the lower mid grunt as well as the tightness that you would usually get from running an overdrive. And actually, that's it. I was actually messing with the treble a little bit, but I actually felt like it was still the best left at noon. And I'm going to be keeping these settings the same. We're going to do another comparison really quick of the actual drive versus this adjusted drive block. And then I'm also going to include the old drive block in there. So you can just kind of have a here or a here. You can have a here. So you can kind of hear the differences that these adjustments have made. And I think you would agree that it's a lot closer to the real pedal now. So yeah, they sound a lot closer now, the new adjusted drive block and the real thing. Moving into a bigger all-in-one unit from a smaller unit and an actual physical analog drive, I was actually really disappointed in the FM9, and I still kind of feel that way. And I love my FM9, but this is definitely its Achilles heel in my opinion, because you really have to go into these other tabs and just kind of adjust it to make it sound right. And even in some of their documentations, they'll tell you to go into additional settings and adjust it to taste. And it would be nice if the default drive block sounded more like the actual drive just by default. To Fractal's credit though, at least there are ways to adjust these things in order to make them sound closer. They give you all the tools you need. It's just not quite as straightforward. And I have a similar feeling about some drive blocks in the Quad Cortex and the Helix as well. And those aren't quite as easy to adjust as the Fractal because there's just not as many upfront additional settings. You have to probably do some EQ work to make those sound more like the real thing. And maybe this is just a thing that modelers don't do well. I might do a video about that in the future. Comment if you'd like to see that video, and also comment if you think that the adjustments really made it sound closer to the real thing. And yeah, that's gonna do it for me. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Later.